the Pupil Services and Special Education Committee meeting. First item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, thank you. Going to move on to item 3. We have a lot of discussion tonight, a lot of topics that the community has brought up that we want to just keep discussing and make sure we put enough information out there. So first up, I think, is TCHS and communications. I think there was some concern about how that works. So if you can, walk us through that, Rich, that would be great.
Sure. So we have mostly part-time students at TCHS. If they're part-time at TCHS, they take their academic classes at O&J and they take their area of interest CHOP at the high school, so at TCHS. So what happens is last year, at the end of the year, we had about 100 plus, maybe 104 students who were part-time, and they are dual enrolled. So they're still part of the high school. They're all communications they receive as part of the list. They're in Skyward. There's attendance. There's advisory, etc. We had about 25 students that were full-time, and when they're full-time, they're actually coded as another school through Skyward. And we have on our SkyAlert list where we send out all the emails, the bulk emails. We have a separate tab for just those full-time TCHS students. If we use the SkyAlert, then the communications, we check that off and go to them too. So for things like Cyber Academy and those things that I send out every once in a while, I click off TCHS and those students get it. If that is missed, they might not get the communication. We also have a pretty close relationship with Mr. Fullerton, the principal at TCHS. So any kind of communications that we think are important, they can mention in their announcements, things like that. So the connection and communication is strong, but I can imagine that some of the full-time students on occasions might miss some things if we're not careful to make sure that we include them in those communications and or give the communications to the principal there as they're full-time. So we're making sure we double check that list. This year, we only have, I guess last year, the 25 students full-time, 15 were seniors. So we only have a handful, 10, 12 kids that are full-time this year. So we're making sure that to double check all of their information, double check phone numbers, emails, and really make an extra effort at the high school to keep them in the loop on all communications.
So the majority of our students from TCHS, they are part-time because they receive their regular education through O&J, correct? And then they go to those specials. And they're still an enrolled O&J student, so they're still receiving the communications. It's more so the kids that are in the full-time program, because of the system issue, it wasn't, you have to click for their group to be sent the email. Yeah,
you have to make sure you actively include them in all communications because they're not coded as part of our high school. But they are invited to our graduation. They get an OJR diploma. We have a very close relationship with the principal over there and the administration. So we try to really keep that communication open, and we'll do an extra double check on those full-time kids this year.
Okay. And then it sounds like, sorry, go ahead.
That's right. So in investigating what was occurring, when we changed principals, we have two systems. We got SkyAlert and we've got Skyward, and parents are very familiar with Skyward and putting information into Skyward. But the mass messaging system that principals are to utilize is SkyAlert. And so when we changed principals, that is where the error occurred, is that the new principal wasn't using SkyAlert. And so the TCHS students were not being communicated with. So now we have an interim. The interim has been trained in using SkyAlert, and so they should be receiving their messages. And we have not heard that they're not, and we know that they are getting the messages that come from the district office.
Okay, great. Any questions from the committee? Are we good on?
Good.
Okay. All right, let's move on to our favorite topic, sleep health and the survey.
Yay.
So a couple board members had asked if we could take a look at what the had been previously done through the Regional Adolescent Sleep Needs Coalition. And at that request, I included the attachment on there with the slides that include questions they asked and the results. That was, they've closed that since. There's also an attachment on there for the public to see, just an explanation of it with any contact information. It looks like they received, I think I noticed 177 responses. 177 students responded, and there were 28 OGR responses. So there was a bit of an inclusion. We didn't actively participate in that, but it sounded like through word of mouth, folks did hear about it. And I think some board members had some, a few questions or wanted to discuss this topic.
Yeah, I was involved in just hearing about this survey as it was being developed in the summer. And I thought that it was a valuable thing to look at because of different behavior that obviously kids would, be using for, sleep behaviors, obviously when they didn't have to be at school at 7:30. But because of just so much going on during the summer and all the craziness, I didn't feel like this was something that we needed to just jump on right away because we had so many other discussion topics that needed to be dealt with. But I'm wondering if this could be, we should be using something like this or a version of this, or starting when we start the school year up to gather information from students, because this survey, if you look at the results of the survey that's there, you will see that, basically, 80% of people feel like their students were, much more well rested and doing things the way that they, that benefited them, their health, when they did not have the early start time. But of course, everybody's life was crazy. So, so maybe some sort of version of this, a survey like this would be helpful, especially in the beginning of the school year when our high school students are participating virtually, but not necessarily, I don't know, like some of them, even if they have a 7:30 class, like there may be students that choose not to attend at 7:30 and choose to, watch a lesson later. I don't know. There just might be information that we want to gather. And I don't know if anybody, I know this is such a trying time right now. It's really hard to bring another thing into our discussion, but I don't know. I still think that this is extremely important. I think that kids' sleep health is should be one of the primary focuses of keeping our children healthy and building immune system and all that type of thing. So I don't know. I don't know if Jennifer has any thoughts on it.
Well, I did see one thing that hopefully would not be as controversial as the start time of classes, which was the submission time of assignments. I know that last year during virtual, we had a midnight deadline, and that was, I guess, across the entire Canvas system. And teachers had the option to put different times in there, but many teachers did not move away from that default. So is that a change that we can make this year, or has it already been made to not have midnight as the default?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Anybody know?
Hey,
Kathy's here. All right.
I can try to answer that. We can discuss this, and that is something that can be changed. So I believe that what we had suggested to teachers to do was to make their assignments due in time for their next class. So if I'm giving the assignment on Monday, for example, for 6th period class, that if I want it in time for the next class, then it would be due on Tuesday prior to that same period, that same 6th period, or whatever period. So it wouldn't necessarily be the default of midnight because the student might be taking advantage of a morning study hall. So that was really the conversation that we had with our teachers last year, and I can bring that up to the high school administrators again.
Well, right, because I definitely got the impression from what I was hearing from the administration that it had been communicated to the teachers, but I had an 11th grader and I asked her when her stuff was due, and a lot of it seemed to be due at midnight. So I think the adoption was spotty.
Okay, well, that's something that we can address with the high school administration.
So it's not that it's due at midnight, it's just they have up till midnight to submit it? Am I understanding that correctly?
It would be due whenever the default might be listed at midnight, but the teacher can make that change. They can.
But I mean, sorry, I mean, like in terms of the student, they can submit it at any time. They don't necessarily have to submit it.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
most of them wait until the last minute. They're high school students.
Absolutely.
But if we did have like the system default to something like 10 p.m., it could just be, you know, like setting a line in the sand to say our students should not be doing homework between 10 and midnight. Even if they are choosing to be awake, then it's not a time they should be trying to get serious work done.
I can't comment on that for all of the high school. I really can't comment on that I think that would be pretty individual for students. I think some of them have responsibilities and are just coming home at that time. I really wouldn't want to speak for all of our students on that.
I happen to know a group of girls right now who are literally vampires. So,
but if we want to influence them not to be vampires.
No, but I know. But what I'm saying is it's not because they think it's cool. It's because of how their clocks are working right now. And they hang out at night and they're awake all night and they sleep all day. And this is a group of friends. It's more than one high schooler. And they're kind of thriving that way, believe it or not. Trust me, I fought it for a long time. But I'm saying I think there is something to the clocks, and I'm not so sure that every student, I think what Kathy was saying, I'm not sure every student would be that we shouldn't have them do something between this hour and this hour, because I definitely think there are differences. And that's for parents to decide and kids and parents decide, that's my opinion. Not that I'm on this committee.
Right, but we're not letting them decide what time we start class, and we're still starting classes at 7:30 in the morning, which is against scientific recommendations.
Yeah, and maybe I misunderstood where you were going with it.
No, I'm just saying, you know, if we're adopting best practices, we should be looking at the start and the end time to preserve sleep, was my point.
Yeah, and mine is too.
I still think it's worth considering a time other than 7:30, but there seem to be significant hurdles to that move. So what can we do to protect their sleep if we can't change the 7:30 start time?
I see what you're saying. I'm not sure at all. Yeah, okay.
I'm not sure that's gonna.
That's not going to influence.
I think it's an individual student thing. I'm not sure that that's really gonna make a huge impact. But if Dr. Soto wants to have the conversation, just trying to help teachers establish a good time for submitting, maybe, you know, right before the class starts for the next time or whatever they think is best, just to help promote that. I think it's a good conversation to have, and then we can see, you know, where it goes from there. I don't know that I think every student is different in terms of, you know, whether or not they take that as a literal, I can work up until midnight, or whether or not students are getting things done ahead of time. I think that's all personal preference and how.
Well, it's not that they think I can work up until midnight. They think I have until midnight, which to a teenager ends up being that they work until midnight. You know, it's that we can't expect them to be terribly advanced in their executive skills, because they're just forming those executive skills for the rest of their lives. So if we make an earlier cutoff, we're encouraging them to adopt better skills in terms of prioritizing their work to be earlier in the day.
Okay.
Jennifer, I totally understand your point, but you know, it's interesting because according to this survey, if you looked at the results, the vampire behavior is actually fairly widespread from what I know. I know tons of middle schoolers that are doing that as well. But the results here show that, vampire or not, these children are getting more, like they're getting way more sleep, like by 2 to 3 hours when they adopt whatever sleep schedule they like. Now, I'm not advocating having school in the middle of the night, but I do think that maybe, you know, better aligning is something that we still have to be committed to doing. And I'm not really sure how to do that, or where, you know, where we go from here. I know we were going to have a series of meetings, you know, to continue this discussion, and obviously it got derailed, and that wasn't anyone's fault. But I'm wondering if maybe, you know, just taking a look at these results, and you know, maybe we need to consider, as soon as our school year begins, reconvening our study of it, and look into, even if it has to be Zoom meetings, getting, you know, back to this scenario and this situation and looking at it, because we can see fairly clearly that when students have a choice, getting up at 5:45 is not very high on the list.
So I'm
Right,
okay,
if you look-
I'm okay with continuing to talk about it, and to, you know, maybe if we administer a survey like that. I think what we found, and what the task force that was going to investigate, was more of those challenges in terms of what were the roadblocks. And I think those roadblocks aren't really there right now. I'm not sure we'll get a good gauge on that. But I think maybe administering a survey, like you had mentioned, maybe towards the end of September, and seeing how students are feeling with the change.
But we've been pretty bad at surveys. I think it needs to be a survey developed by somebody outside of our administration, because it needs to be, you know, standardized wording, standardized
So
approach.
is the questions on this slide the specific questions from their survey, Dr. Marchini?
Yeah, I completely agree with Mrs. Munson. I don't think we should develop a survey of our own. I think what we should do is we should reach out and ask this group to reopen it for, you know, our students only, and have them analyze it and have them look at it, and they can use the data as they like as well. But if you're interested in a survey, I would strongly suggest this one, and let this group administer it.
I think that's a good idea.
And really do a lot of work to ensure a high participation rate, because, you know, you can't tell anything from 28. And it really looks like perhaps there was some self-selection going on here, because, I mean, it's such a humongous, dramatic change between, you know, how much sleep people felt their child was getting prior to the stay-at-home order and during the stay-at-home order. And it is very difficult to tell whether that is because it was a self-selected group of people who felt strongly that their child's habits had changed responding, or if we would still see that dramatic a shift if we had like an 80% participation rate among our student population.
Yeah, we weren't, I didn't include this survey to have these results show or prove or disprove anything. It was just the questions on the survey that we were interested in discussing. The fact 28 O&J Roberts students did it is just a coincidence from this survey, nothing that we pushed out. So if, like I said, I would recommend asking them if they can post it again, and then we could send that out. You know, when we send a Sky Alert out, it's, you know, 13,000 emails, and that doesn't include the students. So we could certainly have parents and students do it, and have them give us the results back. That way it's you know, it's legitimate, and they can even compare it against other things. I'm sure this survey has been used in other communities, and they can compare it. So, you know, I would suggest that if you would like to do a survey, that's what I suggest. It also sounds like, Kathy, you would like me to start some Zoom meetings related to this topic as well. I would beg you, please, if we could wait until after the start of school.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, I think we need to get a month or so into this before we start.
I think Melissa has something she's been trying to chime in. Melissa?
Yeah, I would just, again, like to make a simple suggestion. I've been suggesting this for the last 7 years. We do this gradually. This may be the perfect time to do it. delay start for 15 minutes this year, see how it goes. Next year, when hopefully we'll be more back on board, another 15 minutes. It gives people the opportunity to adjust. And everything's different this year. You're right, a lot of the hurdles have disappeared. I've been saying this for 7 years. Let's just try it gradually. If we hit a stumbling block, if the traffic's too bad at 15 minutes later, we adjust. If the traffic's too bad, half an hour later. I know we could spin our wheels for another year and a half, and I don't see any reason why we can't gradually adjust it and give people the opportunity to see how it works for everybody. If that's our goal, I just think after 7 years of trying to do this in a more symptomatic manner, we all know, I mean, you know, we all know it's very early for these children, but we also all know the logistics of our school district. But to me, that is the most simplistic way to start the effort. I'm just putting it out there, but I've been saying it for 7 years. And here we are 7 years later, and we haven't been able to adjust anything.
Well, yeah, Melissa, I know I've kind of disagreed with you on that point of just like doing it incrementally because I was afraid of the disruption over and over again. But because of the scenario we're in, I kind of feel very much differently about that now.
Yeah.
And would advocate to maybe start more discussion, but also go with 15 minutes. I mean, would that really be a dramatic thing if suddenly school started at 7:45 instead of 7:30 this year? Would anyone really even notice? Would that have any significant impact on anything? If the administrators, you know, feel like that would be possible, I would definitely be in favor of that.
Yeah, you're right. It makes it a different scenario this year. It just does. And we can adjust, but I think it's worth a discussion to give it a whirl. I'll stay out of it.
That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. So I don't know where to go with that, but I guess that's my question then for Dr. Marchini and Dr. Lloyd about whether or not that's a place to start, whether or not that would be something we could look at.
Yeah, what are the stumbling blocks?
Right.
15 minutes.
It is August the 11th. Our buses are already determined and are already populated. So this is something that takes months to develop. Mrs. Crumrine, you're on this call somewhere. Since transportation, you directly oversee transportation, you should probably weigh in right now. She lost her internet earlier.
I'm sorry, I lost
my. Okay.
Took a while to get it figured out. Regarding transportation, right now we have the routes established. If we were, and I'm just thinking out loud here because we were asked this just now, we'd have to work out the conflicts with all of the specialized busing because what we do is we use one bus for as many things as we can. So we're, you know, we're running elementary, we're running secondary. That's my first thought about that.
Are we busing to a lot of private schools?
We are busing to the privates, yes, the private schools that are operating in person, and obviously the charter schools and all the special needs. We could provide you with a list so that you could see who we're busing to as well. I mean, if that would be helpful.
I think that and understanding their start times. I think you had that at some point, and I apologize to ask you for it again.
No, it's okay because it's actually changed. Everything has changed.
Okay. Right, that's what I mean. It's all different.
It's all different. So for example, private schools, some of them are also operating on blended schedules. Their blended schedule is not the same as our blended schedule, but we're providing busing on their blended schedule. So, you know, Chris has been working all summer on that routing, and he's not quite complete. He's just about there. We would just have to, as always, transportation is one of the biggest issues with this. But we could look and see.
So would he be more likely to have a heart attack or view this as a fun challenge?
No, this would be, he'd have a heart attack.
It's a heart attack. Yeah. It's a heart attack. Only because it's August 11th, right? So, you know, that all I can offer right now is that I could start there and see what.
I think just understanding what we're looking at in terms of the private schools. I think that was one of our biggest issues with transportation and what added a lot of costs.
Right. It was.
I'm hesitant because we are so close to the start of the school year to change yet another thing for our kids. Right now, I realize it's only 15 minutes, but I think it's going to have a bigger impact than we think in terms of transportation, and I'm not against it. I think that we got to look at it before we just decide to do it.
Okay, that's fine. And then in the meantime, maybe we can consider when school year starts, have further continuing our discussion as we had previously planned. Maybe not, maybe just over Zoom or whatever, continue talking about the best way to do this and, you know, what we can do in the future. It would be nice just to get whatever information Jackie can give us, because obviously everything has changed. We probably don't have, you know, the schools that we're going to are all different probably, and times are all different and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely looks different than it did before. It was really all new routing, except for ours. You know, our school, we know our schools are easy to route because we have them year in and year out. It's all the other 80 some schools. And some are running and some are not running. And some are running partially, and they, you know, that could be adjusting too. Depends on what happens.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong. This is more than just changing start times. This is adjusting the teacher's contract. This is adjusting the work schedules for all the employees. Like this is much bigger than just moving 15 minutes.
Well, when you're looking at teacher's contract, they have a specified number of hours per day. We would still, you know, have that specified number of hours per day, but we would be adjusting schedules.
So yeah, my assumption was start time and end time would both shift.
Right. Yeah.
So the change in number of hours per day would not
remain.
Change.
Yeah, there's some notification provisions for Teamsters. I think it's 7 days. You know, so I mean,
they would probably appreciate more than that.
yeah. So.
Thanks, Jackie, for weighing in.
Yeah.
I think if you can provide that for us, Jackie, that would be helpful to understand. And then I think we circle back up on this. I feel like this is a lot to ask of everyone. So close to the start of the school year.
Right. And I didn't necessarily mean it had to begin this year, but just to get off this, nothing ever happens. Maybe next year we start that.
I don't know, Melissa, that it's been 7 years.
For me, it has. For me, it has. I haven't always made that statement publicly, but I've made it many times as a suggestion to get moving on it somewhere, because there's always the spectacle of our survey wasn't good enough people didn't respond, and it's just, for me, it has. I think this is the 7th year I brought it up, not necessarily in public, but I have been bringing it up.
All right, let's circle up, because I think we need more information.
Yeah, one last thing on this, and as I said this before, it might be interesting. However, if we decide to survey or whatever, it would be interesting just to note how just get data on how many students are opting to not attend their 7:30 class or whatever when we're doing the virtual or blended. You know what I mean? Just to kind of collect that information to see if students are choosing to not do that.
So I think we're not saying no, right? We're just looking to collect more information. So I think that's helpful. I think it's helpful to understand a survey. It's helpful to understand what it would impact. Because I don't think we've ever looked at the 15-minute model.
No, we haven't.
And what that would impact. So I think we need to understand that. Not to say this couldn't happen for this school year. I just think at this point in time, it's a no, but maybe if some point we had to go virtual, we could explore it at that point. But I think we got to do the legwork ahead of time to understand what changes are happening. I think what we had looked at was specifically, was it an hour, Rich, that we had looked at? Yeah.
We also looked at half an hour.
Half an hour. Yeah, we looked at half an hour.
We looked at 8 o'clock.
So I think just understanding more information, but here's my other thing. There is a lot going on. So I want to make sure we can have people focus on what needs to be focused on right now, because there's a lot with school reopening. So I think if we can maybe jump back into this, maybe towards the end of September, look at doing the survey then, and that kind of thing, just so people can focus on getting school started. If
Okay,
everyone's
sounds
okay with
good.
that.
Mhm.
Does that sound feasible to you guys, Dr. Marchini?
Absolutely.
Okay, okay.
And one more thing about surveys. Some of the surveys that I've had in the business world actually, they sent them out with, I guess, a unique code per person who was invited to the survey so that they knew accurately that they were getting exactly one response per email that was sent out. I don't know how expensive those tools are, but that might be something that we want to consider when we have a very important survey to send out.
Well, and another thing is it possible if we want students to fill out any kind of survey to just have them do it while they're at school? Because then you get
Yeah, I
much
think we
more-
remarked that the paper surveys done in their guidance period were more, I guess, reliable than surveys sent out via email.
Yeah, I mean, my kid doesn't read email ever, but yeah, but you can send parents an email survey, but if kids fill out a survey during school, I think you're gonna get a lot more response.
Can I just jump in here real quick? I'm not on a committee, but I've done lots of surveys in my career. I just to reiterate my request in the past. If we're going to do a survey on something important as this topic, bring in a professional research firm to construct and administer the survey to get randomized, actionable data. They'll collect what data that we want that we think is actionable to help us construct it. And they can also then to make sure that there's no, like as Jennifer said, self-selection bias, or that we have, these groups did respond, these didn't. There's companies that's what they do for a living. They're professionals. So my request is just that we use a professional company for something that's important. That's it.
Got it, Paul.
So I think that leads to just a broader discussion and looking at surveys as a whole and how we can improve. I kind of like the idea of using these people to administer the survey because it's an outside person and this is kind of what they specialize in. I don't know what your thoughts are, Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, this survey in particular was aimed towards parents. So I think even if we wanted to use this group, we'd have to have a survey that was geared towards students too, as well. So we could see what their plans are. And maybe they would be producing that anyway. We could talk to them. I know Dr. Marchini has talked to Kate Doyle, who was involved in this. So maybe we could see if they have a plan to do something that's more geared towards kids. So we could have both of those things.
So Kathy, maybe that's an action item for you and I. We can reach out to her after the fact, see what their thoughts are on surveys and how they're really looking at this so we can better understand and then come back to talk about.
Yep.
Right, and what strategies do they advise for getting a good response rate? Because if we have another survey where only 20 or 30% of people respond, our time and effort is wasted again.
Yeah, it's not that helpful.
Well, maybe they have some recommendations on how to give it.
Right, and I guess I would kind of use that as part of an analysis on whether we definitely go with them. If they don't seem to have an approach to getting a high respondent rate, then maybe they're not the best partner.
Well, let's reach out to them and have a conversation and then we can circle up.
All right, sounds good.
Okay. All right. Next one, Anti-Racism Diversity Initiative.
So I wanted to update the committee on the two things, anti-racism and then social and emotional learning. We had, for the anti-racism, we had a leadership team of administrators and teachers last year go to the Race Institute in Philadelphia. And they went through a multi-day training. And the person who's involved with that is, her name is Ali Michael. Very, very impressive authority on race relations. And they came back, met with Dr. Lloyd and I, and asked us to, explore this topic more. And this was a year and a half ago. At the time, we had started working on social and emotional learning. We reached out to Tom Stecker, and he said he would include that in his social and emotional learning program, and I'll talk about that in a second. And we had a couple great sessions with Tom and a few of his colleagues. The group came back to us this year, this summer, and said they really felt that this had to be a standalone program. They didn't want it lumped in with social and emotional learning, although there are some areas where it ties in. They really wanted to have, quote, courageous conversations, really start this conversation about racism and, exploring race. And I'd asked them who they would like me to reach out to sort of lead this initiative. And they specifically asked for Allie Michael. So I reached out to her, had a couple of meetings with her, and we were able to contract with her to come and help us put this into place. On the 13th this week, I have our administrative team, and each building principal will bring 2 or 3 members of their staff to it. Well, we'll have it's a Google Meet training on the 13th, and she'll present 2 topics. One is the question of exploring race questions, and then also map out a potential strategy for the buildings to use with their groups as a process of inquiry. She recommended a book that she wrote that would be appropriate for our setting, and that's, Raising Race Questions is her book. So we purchased one for each member, and on the 13th we start our initial training, and then she'll work with us during the year. We'll have another large meeting in January, and each building group can talk about their progress on this strategy. So it's a pretty exciting start. I'm happy to answer questions, but I have to say, other than talking to her, really I have to go through the training myself on Thursday to better understand the process. But the fact that our leadership team had asked for this person, her qualifications are unbelievable. And in talking with her, she really, I think it's a good person for our setting. So I just wanted to give you that brief update. If you have any questions on that.
Any questions, guys?
Just one thing. Do you see this as impacting our curriculum as well, this whole process?
Yeah, thank you. It was also recommended that we look into, it's a curriculum supplement called Tolerance and Tolerance Teaches, sorry. And in that curriculum, it shows activities you can use. So I was going to have the teams in each building sort of review that as well. So as they're, asking these hard questions, having these courageous conversations, they can also be looking at some materials for review, and we'll include the curriculum specialist on that as well. So that was recommended as a potential source for, having this eventually get in the classroom. This inquiry process starts with these conversations, but in January, February, we'll be looking, for action items, what each school, what the district can do to really address the questions of racism and race in OJ. So we'll have action items, hopefully, to move forward. Like social and emotional learning, this isn't supposed to be a one-hit wonder, one speaker. This is supposed to be a multi-year effort to really, firmly address racism in our classrooms.
Great. Sounds like a really good program. I'm excited to hear how this is going. Do you think we could get an update on the next time you guys meet?
Yeah, I think what would be more effective is, rather than me, I'm just trying to give you a quick summary now, but I'm hoping to bring one of the building-based teams, and we'll have a leadership team in the district. The initial team was Vicki Morgan, Sheila Amadei from the middle school, Ryan Howard, Karen Suzadell, I'm forgetting someone in there. There was a few other people. And I think letting them guide us on what to do next is really helpful. And I think having them address the board on how they thought the initial presentation was and some of the work in the buildings would be very effective for you to hear about it.
Awesome.
I forget if you said this, sorry. Did you say the Raising Race Questions, that book, was that by Allie Michael?
Yes, she wrote the book, and it goes along with her presentation, but it also gives strategies of how to start these conversations and this process in the buildings.
So it's like specifically geared towards like education?
Oh, directly towards education.
Okay.
And her book also is more geared for communities that are predominantly white. You know, because really it's a very hard conversation for people to have, and you know, and there's a bias that maybe the conversation doesn't have to be had. And so we really wanted to make sure that it's an important conversation to follow through with.
Okay, great.
Social emotional learning, as you recall, last year or 2 years ago, we had a team come to the committee of the whole. You may or may not have recall, and they went over.
Sorry.
Yep, it was a part of the leadership cohort, and they came forward and they asked about starting a social emotional learning district-wide committee. At the beginning of the last school year, we started working with Tom Stecker and his associates. We had probably close to, I would say, all in all, 200 students, parents, and staff attend 8 different sessions at the IU. So we really pulled in a lot of the stakeholders groups, hit on different members of our staff, like the counselors, nurses, principals, parent groups, and really explored how social emotional learning can enhance the education within the classroom, and got a lot of their input and feedback. If you look at the agenda, I included the recommendations from Tom Stecker and his associates in here. We met with Tom via Google at our administrative retreat in June, and we started to sort of frame out how this model would look moving forward as an administrative team. We're going to talk about it again tomorrow, just to keep it fresh. A lot of things have happened this summer, so we wanted to kind of go over it again. And then we'll be contracting with Tom Stecker again to help us with this district-wide coaching model. And the coaching model is, again, teams in the schools that are more geared towards instruction. So IST, academic coaches, principal, and they'll be looking at our curriculum supervisors, our special ed supervisors, and really looking to see how the SEL standards can be embedded into our classrooms. So it starts out this whole year with, the whole district in groups looking at this, and now the action plan is to move it into the schools with school-based teams. So tomorrow, what we're going to be doing is our principals will be talking with me, our supervisors, et cetera, sort of frame out what we want this to look like. The trick is that it's very powerful with Tom Stecker and his group to be in the same room with them and do the activities at the IU. Obviously in March that stopped, and we continued everything else through Zoom. We'll have to start this work and we're probably going to wait to start this work until October as well, just to get a few weeks of school in session. But we're going to have to do it virtually. And so I think we're going to talk tomorrow about how that's going to look, what we can do, and with his model and recommendations here, how we can do that. Part of it is also a really exciting part of this is a student voice facilitation. And there's the buildings will select 50 students of influence and really allow the students to help us work through the implementation. I think getting that student part, when we were at the IU with Tom, having the students there right at the table working side by side with us was so powerful to better understand what they thought would be most effective as far as implementing the standards into the curriculum. So that's a real exciting part of this. And we're going to start that work more likely October.
Yeah, I have to say when the cohort came through and they first presented this, it was all, really exciting information. And I think this is awesome that we're continuing this, and like, I think we had talked about this when the cohort had gone through, but it was, this is something that, corporations are looking at and training their staff on. So I think this is, really good to start at this younger age.
The great example of teacher leadership in our school district.
Yeah.
And how this has really grown. This is also funded through the grant that we get from the Pottstown Health and Wellness Foundation. So we've been able to continue this work thanks to their generous funding. And as we've talked about many times, that this is an important area for where we need to start when we return to school, that the social and emotional health of our students is paramount coming back in the fall. So
Definitely.
we're well poised. We're well poised.
Well, and I do especially like the student involvement in this social emotional learning plan, which makes me think, I hope that we have that component in our eventual diversity plan also, that we make sure that we engage the students and hear their voice, and not just students of color, all the students, as far as what they think is the current status in our schools, and what they think.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Any questions on those two topics? I just wanted to give you a brief update to make sure you knew we were still working on these and moving forward with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Marchini. I think the next one is for Dr. Lloyd. Is that right?
It's a fall health and safety plan. So board members, if you will go to the plan in board docs, Mr. San Francisco if you will click on the link that I sent you and project that on the screen. It would be good if I got to the right part on there we are. Can you, board members, please go to page 31. We have a few additions to the plan. Remember that even though you've voted on the plan, it has been submitted to PDE. It continues to be fluid, and we need to continue to revise it as we move forward. So on page 31, you should be seeing the heading that says monitoring student and staff health. Scroll down just to the very first bullet item. It says the requirements are, not you, Mr. Sanfran. This is just to get the board members in the right spot on the plan that's been updated. So the requirement is the monitoring of student and staff for symptoms and history of exposure. Then when you're under the action steps, that first bullet point, monitor the DOH, which is the Department of Health, and the CCHD, Chester County Health Department, levels of community transmission data to determine safest instructional model. And so this is the information that is new to the plan. So if we now look at what Mr. San Francisco is projecting on the screen, this was just added the other day. This was just released by PDE and the Department of Health. And so what's important about this model this new information that they have added is that this now provides school boards with the metric that you've been looking for. The Chester County Department of Health will also be providing you with a metric, but this allows districts across our state that do not have the benefit of a local health department to analyze data that is being pulled together by the Department of Health for districts to make decisions about the instructional model that they are utilizing. This particular model contains guidance that relies on two standards of public health metrics, the incident rate and the percent positivity of diagnostic testing. So these metrics are available for every county in Pennsylvania. We're able to click on, look at the dashboard and look at this information. Every Friday it will be posted, and so it's available to all of you and to the public. Mr. Sanfran, if you would scroll down to the chart, it appears below the heading, recommend, yep, stop when you get to that chart right there, perfect. And so this is the type of information that will be making decisions on. So the data is a different link. This is the chart that is guiding the decision making. So if we look at the first column, this is the level of community transmission in the county. Then it moves across to the incident rate per 100,000 residents. The most recent 7 days is what folks will be able to see. They'll be able to see the most recent 7 days and the 7 days that are prior to that. It looks to me like they're going to just continue to add the data. So then there's also the column that says the percent of positivity for the most recent days, and then the recommended instructional model. And so as the board knows that we have proposed the blended model and a virtual model. There is the full in-person model, but as we know, we are not at a place in this pandemic where we can implement the full in-person model. We would have to have a very low rate of transmission, so less than 10 people per 100,000 and less than 5% of a positivity rate in order to be considered in this level of low. The moderate level, the middle of the chart here, it's kind of tricky to get it all on one screen, I know. The incident rate per 100,000 residents needs to be between 10 to less than 100, or a positivity rate of 5% to less than 10%. This is currently where Chester County falls. When you click on the data and you see that Chester County is currently listed as moderate right now, as many of you are aware, that we have a 4% positivity rate in Chester County. Chester County will be providing us with more detail about our specific townships where we know that our positivity rate is less than that in our townships. But Chester County right now is listed as moderate, and that means that the plan that the board voted on, which was the blended learning plan or the full remote learning plan, is appropriate when we're in the moderate range. The last range is the substantial. I have to say that I believe that if we had a substantial transmission, that we would be back in the red phase. Some people think that the red, yellow, and green phases have now become so political that we won't be using those, but it does give us the metric for the incidence rate per 1,000 in the substantial would mean that it is 100 or greater than, or a positivity rate of greater than 10%, and then we would have to be fully remote if the data was showing that, which we all thought of as being the red phase. So if they abandon the phase, we now will have this metric. Chester County Department of Health is providing us with something similar. We had an opportunity, Mrs. Profit and Mr. Deal, as board leadership, we had an opportunity to speak with Jean Kasner, the director of the Chester County Health Department, who discussed their model, which is a 4-prong model. And so we will be looking to our local authority, which is the Chester County Health Department, to see what they are saying. And we will be looking here to the Department of Health for Pennsylvania as well. The recommendation from Chester County Health Department, and we may want to add this to our wording, is that we would monitor this for 3 weeks at a time, 3 consecutive weeks of monitoring and making our decisions based off of that. So Mr. Sanfran, you can go ahead and click off of this and bring up the other flow charts, because I'm going to direct the board to that next page.
Explain the 3 weeks again? I'm sorry.
So what they're recommending is that we look at 3 consecutive weeks of data when making our decision. And so you'll see that for Chester County, it's very consistent data already. You've been looking at the maps that I've been providing you every week for Chester County that shows how consistent the data is. The recommendation is that we consider 3 weeks of data if we were to make a decision. So the intent of this model is so that it's not just that we're using it now as we're looking to reopen, but as we start school, that school boards and superintendents are consulting this to determine whether we need to become more restrictive or if we are ready to move to the full reopening. So if we were looking to open fully, we would need to be considering 3 weeks of data, of consistent data.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification.
I think when we talked about this on Friday, it was because of the varying times that tests are returned. Is that correct, Dr. Lloyd?
Right. So we know that there's a lag, right? And so they're looking to take that into consideration.
I would like to have a conversation around where the lines are drawn on that table.
On the one from the Department of Health?
Yes, because I had read something that said that it was, I think, the Pennsylvania Teachers Association had declared that they felt that conditions would be unsafe for teachers if the positivity rate was over 5%. So that 5 to 10% still puts us in the moderate according to that chart, which would still put us in blended learning. Do we risk our teachers going along with that determination, and at what percentage do we need to, it seems to me like there might be a percentage between 5 and 10% that we might need to consider going full remote.
Chester County Health Department is going to give us more guidance, more specific guidance on this. This is, general for the whole state, and PSEA, the State Teachers Association, came out endorsing the use of this metric across the state. Okay. So I hear what you're saying. That does seem like a lot. We're very fortunate in Chester County that we are below that 5%. And we've certainly heard that in other states. But Chester County will be coming out with its own recommendation that we haven't seen yet. We had a peek at it, but I think that they're going to give a range on theirs.
When that's going to be available?
Supposedly Thursday. When Jean Kasner was part of my meeting today with Chester County superintendents, and she indicated that Thursday we would get to see that revision. Everybody was a little blindsided by this coming out from the Department of Health, and so the Chester County Health Department was ready to release theirs, and then this information came out, and so they want to go back and make a couple of changes to their document.
You guys mind if I ask a quick question? Do you know what is the difference between incident rate and percent positivity?
What's the difference? It says and or, because we have counties that are much smaller that don't have.
Percentage would take into account your size.
No,
that's why
positivity is a percentage of tests taken rather than a positivity in the population. So when you look at the Chester County dashboard, you know how there's those nice bars that show how many tests were taken and how many were negative?
Yeah.
And how many positive? Positivity is how many were positive out of those total number of tests taken.
So incidents. So for example, this is an end statement, less than 10 incidents and less than 5% positivity rate. We're in the high, I think 38, if I remember looking at the chart. I just looked at incident rate per 100,000. But did I just lose?
Nope, you're still on here.
We can hear you.
It said join. It's like, I went black and it said join new meeting. Okay, sorry. So it says, so our incident rate per 100,000 is high according to this low row, but we're low when you look at percent of positivity. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around it. It's because we know according to how many tests were taken versus how do you know you have actual incidents if you didn't take tests? Do you know what I'm saying? Did she review that? I'm sorry if I'm not understanding this.
So I also understand from what I learned today that in that incident rate, when we look at that on that Chester County dashboard, that also includes presumptive positive cases, that they aren't. So the results, they're presumptive. They presume that they're going to be positive. So,
and who's they? The person or medical professional?
The medical professionals have deemed them presumptive positive.
Okay, so then that's the difference between incident rate and percent positivity. Incident rate is inclusive of presumed positivity, whereas percent positivity are only confirmed tests of
And
positivity.
right. And so when we see what Chester County Health Department is, one of their indicators will be the rate of confirmed cases.
Okay.
And I think that that's a very important piece. And as I said, they have 4 indicators that we'll be looking at, and we that's why our plan includes both the Department of Health and Chester County, who's our local authority.
Thank you.
And not relying on just one of these. All right, let's take a look at the next part. So I would like for you on your health and safety plan, if you would just scroll down to the next page, that's page 32. Let's go on to page 33. This is just a minor addition to the plan, but it is something that we have been waiting for from the health department. Our nurses have been specifically waiting for this, and parents have had many questions that I think that the flow charts are going to help to answer their questions. If you notice when you're looking at the health plan, board members, you're going to see that there is a hyperlink that says school response flow chart. So the verbiage has not changed about what we're going to do if a student presents with symptoms or if a staff member presents with symptoms. What we've done is we've inserted the hyperlink to these flow charts. And so Mr. San Francisco has the flow charts up on the screen for you to be able to take a look at. So we have a number of scenarios that are going to, that we're anticipating could occur. And so we are planning for those scenarios. And the first one is if a person has failed the health screening. They are running a fever, they're coughing, they're fatigued. This is what this specifically speaks to. So you see it starts in the green. The individual fails the health screening. We're asking our parents to take responsibility and screen their children at home, and the same with our employees. So they're not to come to school with these symptoms, but that's not to say that a person doesn't start to experience the symptoms once they're here. So the individual fails the health screening, it says, and then the arrow points to if individual at school when the screening is failed, no. All right, oftentimes what we're asking is parents are going to call and they're going to say, my child is symptomatic for COVID. So we're going to be reminding them what they are supposed to do, and if they need to be going to be tested and to contact their health provider. If they're here at school when they come down with the symptoms, then it says yes, they're here. Does the individual have at least one symptom from group A and from group B? This hyperlinks to a chart that you already approved as part of the plan for what the symptoms are as per the CDC. This is the type of information that we will be sending home to families so that they can put on their refrigerator. It's on our website. It's everywhere. This part has not changed. So if they don't have those symptoms, then we would move the individual to the school's designated quarantine room, contact the family for the student to be picked up, clean the room. We do not need to submit a COVID-19 report to the health department. Let's go back to that spot where it says, does the individual have at least one symptom from group A or B? And the answer is yes. So now they're at school with us. This means that we have to isolate them. The nurse needs to assess. We move the individual to the isolation room and assess the individual's relationship to others. So for example, is there a sibling in the school? What classroom are they in? Did they ride the bus? There's a lot of information that you have to determine their relationship to others. Are any of the following true? So You interview the student, you interview the parent. Is the individual in close contact to a confirmed case? So you can see how we're already starting to do some of the work for contact tracing. Was the individual in close contact of another individual with COVID-like symptoms without another diagnosis? And then has the individual traveled to a COVID-19 restricted area? So then if yes, then here's what happens next. And so this directs the school nurse what to happen. It also allows us to inform the community about what we will need to do. So then we have to identify the close contacts. We have to send the student or the employee home. We have to identify all of the individuals that were 6 feet and spend 15 minutes of time with the individual, regardless of if they had a face covering. We have to then quarantine any of those individuals, contact the family for pickup, provide written guidance at the time of the pickup. So not only do we tell the person, if we're talking about a student, not only do we tell the parent, but we also will be providing them with a set of directions that they need to follow. If the entire class or the cohort is identified, then we have to retain all of them in that classroom. So that then becomes temporary quarantined. If the entire class is not identified, then we move the individuals to the quarantine room. But if all of the individuals in the room can become quarantined, because remember, our elementary students are in a cohort of students, so a whole classroom could be quarantined. Then we have to report this to the Chester County Health Department. We have to clean the areas that are impacted, and then we have to notify parents that this has occurred. We have to notify parents in school that this has occurred. We have to update the COVID list of individuals and the dates for the tracking of these cohorts, and then the health department begins their investigation and individuals go off to be assessed. The next flow chart, this is if we have somebody that is, symptoms are presenting. The first one is that they failed the health screening. Now here is where the individual is presenting with the actual symptoms that are from group A or B. It starts all the way back with, is the individual in school and they're sick? And so we will follow this along with yes. If they've got the symptoms from group A and from group B, then we isolate, we contact the families, and the process continues very much as it was discussed above, that we need to quarantine, we need to notify the health department, we need to clean, and then the health department begins their investigation. And then the health department will make some other determinations from there. The next flow chart is what we will do if we have a positive test reported. So the very first part of this starts out with that the individual reports positive, and that, notice, this can be a student or this can be an employee. Is the individual in school when the report is received? We certainly hope not, that parents are doing their part and employees are doing their part to stay home. We are used to, as a society, of powering through. This year, we cannot be powering through. If we're sick, we need to stay home. And we've relaxed our attendance policies accordingly so that people do that and so that our employees do that. If there is if a positive case, then we're following the yes. We have to move the individual to the school's designated isolation room. We then have to contact the family for picking up. Notice that we then identify all the close contacts, because again, we're talking about the contact tracing. We notify the health department, we clean, we close the school, And we notify the parents that the school will be closed. And then the health department continues their investigation from there. If we have, so notice if we have a positive case, if we have a presumptive positive case, we will close the school and we will clean until the school can be cleaned. We can reopen. If we have a positive case, we will have to close, clean, and then we will also take direction from the health department. The last one is a close contact reported. Many people may have already experienced this summer with a close contact reported of a member of your family or a friend, and the health department has determined that you have had close enough contact that you should quarantine. So oftentimes this is the health department that is triggering this, that the health department has been alerted and you are getting contacted from the health department. We also will get contacted from the health department to make sure that individuals are quarantined. They'll want to know if you have the symptoms. We will ask the same thing. If you do, okay, and there's a probable cause, then the recommendation is going to be that you're tested or the child is tested for COVID. But you still need to quarantine. If there's no symptoms, the individual quarantines, the student can continue to participate in school remotely, but we are asking that the students remain quarantined or the faculty remains quarantined until the doctor has cleared them to come back or until they've had a negative test. Again, this gets reported to the health department and they launch their investigation. The last part of this, I think that's the last slide, Mr. Sanfran. Yes, it is. So this is being added to our plan. Our nurses are so appreciative that the health department has come out with this very specifically. Our plan does include other information such as notifying, when to notify, who to notify, at what times. That is very specific to what the individuals do. It doesn't necessarily speak to the notifications that take place. That's already in the plan. That is speaking more to quarantining and excluding people and if they have the symptoms. So we are adding that into the plan.
Susan, it's also on the website too, right? Under the summer fall reopening, it's labeled as school response action, so people can get it on the website too.
So people can get it there. They can look at the when we send out our next communication to parents. This is information that parents have been wanting to be able to see what that whole process is, and their teachers as well, wanting to know what the whole process is. So we're grateful that they put this together, and it most certainly belongs in the plan. So if we do, do we have any questions from board members about those flow charts?
Dr. Lloyd, it's John Deal. What again was the difference between the first and the second flow charts?
Oh, sure. Ask me after I clicked off of that, Mr. Deal.
Yeah, they're in a different order, but I am definitely having trouble figuring out which of these blocks is different between the two. Because once I follow all the flows, they seem to be very much in line with each other.
Health versus symptoms.
Okay. Go back to the page where I was looking at them.
I mean, there's an arrow missing on the second one, but.
Well, you're looking at the draft.
Yeah.
The ones
but
that
if you rearrange them both the same, if they both turned out to be identical, except for that green thing at the beginning.
They just.
Yeah, one says they failed the health screening, right? And the other says they're sick. I just don't know what the difference between those, what that means.
Right, because if they were sick, they would fail the health screening.
So that if they're showing a symptom, they are failing the health screening.
Okay, there we go.
So it doesn't necessarily, I guess, mean if they're sick. So
you can fail the health screening and obviously not have COVID. the second one is where they clearly have symptoms that are presenting as COVID symptoms. I'm not sure if because you have the draft, I'm looking at the one at 5 o'clock that was just released. I can't see the header on this, Mr. San Francisco, what you're projecting for the board there. Okay, symptoms presenting, and what does it say on the first? Can you go back up to the first one? That's where they failed the health screening. So they are the same. You're right. They are the same, because just because you failed the health screening does not mean that you have COVID symptoms. You may have COVID-like symptoms. So they put
or you could be asymptomatic, right? You're not
maybe it's
sick, but you
allergies
failed
and
the health
not-
screening.
Maybe
right,
maybe
or allergies.
and not sick.
So this is a big question that a lot of people have had about that you can be failing the health screening and not have COVID. It could be allergies, it could be asthma, it could be any number of things and not be COVID.
Thanks for that. And I think an indication of a thanks that I personally got to express to our health director, because obviously a lot of work went into this stuff.
They've definitely been listening to the requests of superintendents and school boards and nurses. Our nurses have worked very closely with the Chester County Health Department, providing them with regular input into their plan and into these flow charts. So Mrs. Prophet, I think we need a motion to move this forward, because we have to keep getting it approved by the board. Every time we make a change, we would need to move it forward to the board for their meeting on the 17th to vote on it again on the change.
I'm very happy that they're compiling all this, and that I was very grateful to meet with her on Friday. She had a lot of information to share, and you can tell that they've been working on this on how to provide more information for schools.
Very impressive.
Does the committee have any questions about the additions?
Well, I really think that for those first two, either they should be combined into one, or if they need to remain two separate, they should be visually the same so that people can tell that they are actually the same. Because right now, the flows go in different directions, and I'm a very visual person, so when I map them in my brain, they come out as different things, even though each box, like the end result is actually the same.
These are the flow charts prepared by the Chester County Health Department. So are you suggesting we rework their flow charts and not just adopt them?
Well, I would go back to them with the question, why did they route the flows two different directions if they're actually the same flow chart with just different starter green circles?
Jennifer, it seems to me that there are two different circumstances. One is where somebody failed a health screening. The other is where somebody's actually sick. So I don't know if that's where they would draw the kind of the difference, but maybe we can ask our director for greater clarification.
Right. My problem is that when you get to the second yes, no, does individual have at least one symptom from group A or two symptoms from group B? Yes is down on the first chart and to the right on the second chart, and that makes no sense to me. Yes should be the same direction on both charts if they're really the same flow, which they do appear to be.
No, Jennifer, the difference is they're the same topic, but the yes, no changes versus, you see what I'm saying?
What the yes
indicates.
No, but when you follow the flows, they're identical. They're just in different places on the paper.
Yes, so what you're saying, I'm answering. So in other words, if the answer to do you have one symptom from these things, the answer is no, you're moving to the right if they failed the health screening, and you're moving them to the designated quarantine room, blah, blah, blah. If the answer is yes, the outcome is different.
But it's not.
Okay, I think we can ask Dr. Lloyd to communicate the feedback. I don't know that we're going to be able to change it tonight. I'm happy that they're giving us guidance, and I think this is a lot more than what we've had in the past.
So I
The
made a
outcome
note.
is different. Let me just say this so it's clear. The outcome is different depending on how you answer that question, that second question.
But it's not.
It is, Jennifer.
The boxes are
answer that
exactly the same.
question-
What's
if I
different?
Let me finish my sentence. If I answer that question no, then I'm moving to the right for the one. If I answer it yes, I'm moving down. Whereas for the sick, if I answer it yes, I'm moving to the right. Whereas I would have gone no for the other one. They're two different scenarios. They're different outcomes.
But the boxes, when you follow the boxes around for yes, they're identical to the yes boxes. When you follow the boxes for no, they're identical to the no boxes.
Oh, like that's the same stuff happening within them?
Yes, they're
I'm
just
sorry.
in different places on the sheet.
Okay,
Wow.
we can
All
have,
right, we're done. You're right. Done.
we can have
Right.
Dr. Lloyd give feedback and then, but I think we've got to move forward with this right now. I don't want
Okay.
to not put it in just because it's
I
different.
will.
Yeah, it's going to cause more confusion if we have two different charts that are actually the same chart, but they're flowed different directions. See, Lydia and I
Maybe
can't
we're
even agree.
trying to differentiate it because it is a kind of a different question, but we can have, Dr. Lloyd's got a great relationship with Chester County Health Department. We can have her relay the concern.
Yeah.
I will be meeting again with them on Thursday.
Awesome.
Twice a week.
Okay, so I need a motion to move this forward to the full board. And correct me if I'm wrong, Susan, would this go on Monday?
The 17th.
Okay.
Yes.
Can I just make one quick
Motion-
comment on this?
Sure.
Just a tiny comment. Obviously all this detail is great and everything, but I just noticed that when you get to the question about individuals that were less than 6 feet for 15 minutes, obviously I just would like to point out that it's our goal that that would be no one, correct? As the way that we are trying to set up our desks and reducing the class size and all those things. So that, that would hopefully be our box where we stop the process, correct?
Yes, that is our goal. I mean, all of our desks will be 6 feet apart. And so I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would like
that
to move
reminded-
this on. Okay, go ahead. Sorry, Jennifer.
That did remind me of one more question that I had, which was the duration. Is it all who were within less than 6 feet of them that day while they were in school, or is there like several days back that you have to go for that?
When it is that day that they don't go back. My experience in the spring when we were contacted about this, it was for that day that we had to provide them the class list and the bus roster for that day.
Okay.
And that shouldn't really change.
No, because they're in a cohort, right? They're in a group. They're the
Yeah, unless
elementary.
they had a sports activity or something, but then it would be up to the family and the county to identify that because that happened out of
Right.
school, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We provide them with all the names while they're with us. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I get a
Okay, so
motion?
if everyone's good, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this, knowing that that chart might be moved around, but in its current state, it's still fine.
Second.
Okay, thanks, guys. All right, I'm gonna open this up. Any more questions or comments from the committee?
There was one more question that I had asked Kathy to talk to Dr. Markini about, and that was just the overall numbers of students who are signing up for our OJR Virtual Academy, knowing that those numbers are not finalized, but I was just interested in hearing where we are.
So I think we should probably share once those are final with the public, Dr. Lloyd?
Yes. Tomorrow.
Yep, tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
High interest, high level of interest.
Yeah.
Are you talking about you just mentioned the numbers, right?
For cyber, yes.
Yeah. Can I ask just what you did give to us, just for my understanding and clarity? Hold on, let me get there. That is just I see obviously the cyber enrollment. The total school enrollment though, is that how many kids have enrolled? So that is a percentage of enrollment, or it's a percentage of actual kids? Like, do I have the numbers of people who enrolled for blended or no?
It's just enrollment for cyber.
So, because I think what we need, what's missing from here is who has the numbers enrolled for blended, because it's not
Well, there's no enrollment for blended, so I think we'd have to do some math and just figure out who's removed from the district, like who's removed themselves from the district, who
I did that.
the total population was.
The total population is the total population, cyber and blended.
And then the total
You just
school
have to
population,
subtract.
you have to make
Where
sure
are
you know.
supposed to register for which one you prefer.
It was just registering for cyber.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right. We can, when
There are
we,
too many things. No, then that answers my question. If that answers my question. I was just thinking, like, if not everybody enrolled yet, we wouldn't
Yeah.
have the full picture, but we do have the picture to date because you don't have to register for blended. You only have to register for cyber.
So Dr. Marchini, just to clarify, the total school enrollment number that you provided, is that subtracting individuals that have withdrawn? Or is that keeping, like,
Yeah.
how did you come to that number?
As of last week,
Okay.
the end of last week, we were able to pull the current enrollment.
Okay.
So that total enrollment will fluctuate based on kids withdrawing and enrolling in O and J. You have to enroll first before then choosing which one. So that's a snapshot from last Thursday, that 5418.
Okay. All right, any more questions on this current staff?
Nope.
Okay. All right, so we're going to open it up to public comment on any of the items from 3.01 to 3.05.
This is Prophet. We have Mrs. Herzog.
Okay.
Mrs. Herzog, you are unmuted.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am not quite sure why, what the point is in doing another sleep survey, but if you are insistent upon that, then I would say that the three authors of the survey that you have in hand there are all PhDs. One's a psychologist, two are behavioral sleep specialists. And so that survey would actually be an excellent one to use, I would think. They're also all regional, and so it was with the region in mind that they created this survey. It's interesting that Mrs. Booth brought up that incremental plan. I've actually never heard her say that before, but I would agree that an incremental increase would be interesting to do at this time. However, I would suggest 30 minutes rather than 15. But I do understand that there are many hurdles and that it's just a shame that we had not progressed to this point already before all the schedules were put in place, so that could actually be considered. The three PhDs that I mentioned have compiled something very useful, some tips for how to help students get back on a more routine sleep-wake pattern for the start of the school year and how to adopt healthy sleep habits. So I think that you'd be very interested in that document. I will send it to the board and to Dr. Marchini, and I would ask that you put this on the Healthy Start Times page on the website, which I currently can't find. So I'm hoping that it is still there, and actually would love if it were more prominent. But I think it would be a very good addition to that site. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Herzog. I would agree with you on utilizing these individuals who specialize in this topic for a survey. I think with how school has been evolving and changing over the summer and what it looks like, that I don't know that we could have planned for a 15 minutes starting later, because we quite frankly just started talking about reopening on July 21st. So I think it's moving pretty rapidly with all of the changes and guidelines that we're receiving right now. So we're not going to give up on the topic. We've got to just focus on getting kids back in the building at this point in time. And then we can definitely look at the webpage. I know that the webpage is being updated at the moment. So that might be part of the reason why some things aren't showing. I'm not sure. The tech committee would have to answer what's going on, give an update on the website. I'm not really sure where that stands right now.
I was not aware that the page had been removed, so I guess we'll just have to find it.
Yeah, send that thing to us with all
The
that
document.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Under student services and Department of Student Services, sleep health, on the left, there's a link, and I believe it takes you to the page.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just sent it to Mrs. Herzog as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay.
Mrs. Prophet, the next person is Mr. DeFusco. Mr. DeFusco, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you. Mark DeFusco, East Coventry. I was just wanted to ask about the flow chart. Is there any consideration, or did they figure in the lag in testing time when a student is presumed positive, or even one who has the symptoms, and then we wait 10 days, 2 weeks for a test? What happens to the students that have been close, or that student during that time period?
So that's not part of the health chart, Mark. That is part of this health and safety plan, which it's tied to the Chester County plan that directs us and our nurses on how we're supposed to respond. On our webpage, there is a link to the exclusion. My page isn't responding. So when you're on our homepage under the summer fall reopening plan, there is a link called the exclusion from and return to school requests. That's also part of the health and safety plan. And so this specifically tells parents, teachers, and our school nurses what will happen. So if we exclude there's 3 scenarios: current COVID-19 symptoms, positive COVID test, close contact of COVID positive individuals. And so it then tells you return to school under these conditions, and it identifies in detail what those conditions are. So if it says, for example, a positive COVID test with symptoms, it says 24 hours with no fever and improvement in symptoms and 10 days since symptoms first appeared. And so that means that's when the student can return. Our plan says that they cannot return unless they have a note from the doctor stating that that's the date that they can return. A positive COVID case without symptoms, it's the same thing, 10 days after the test was collected. If symptoms develop during the 10 days, they follow return to school guidance for a positive COVID test with symptoms. And so each of those is laid out there with the details on how long the individual needs to be excluded from school. And then, like I said, they can come back only with a note from the doctor stating that they can return.
Okay, that's confusing me more, because then if somebody got a test, why would they be back in school at the time of the return of the test results?
Because we are relying on individuals to be honest and not return to school.
Okay.
So, Dr. Lloyd, I'm just wondering, since these particular topics you've pulled out on the website for parents, I'm just wondering, as we get closer to school and we start communicating out what it's going to look like, if we can definitely highlight those sections in those documents, because I think they're really great documents, and they're kind of a snapshot of what the health and safety plan wholly encompasses. And I think just so parents understand where exactly to find it would be super helpful. I'm sure you have that on your list, but just
Right, I agree. I think that we'll probably have to communicate this multiple times now that all of this is in place, and now that the health department has finalized their documents, because much of what we were using before was their draft, and so they've now finalized all of this for us. So I think I agree with you, Mrs. Prophet. It'll be helpful for people to have it, but I think we'll have to be continually communicating it.
Yeah.
But back to Mr. DeFusco's point, if somebody was in school at the time that they received a positive, we should be looking at their contacts from the time the test was taken through when the positive was reported. So shouldn't we give that feedback back to the county health department?
We provide the health department with whatever they've asked us for. And so my experience has been they ask us for the names of the students in the class, they name the names of the students on the bus, the names of all the teachers that the student has had. So whatever they ask us for, that is what we provide them with.
Mrs. Pratt, we have one more.
Okay.
It's Renee. Renee, can you give us your full name and your township of residence, please?
Sure, it's Renee Ayers, and it's I'm in East Vincent Township. I wanted to comment on the TCHS communications 3.01. So mainly it affects the full-time TCHS students, but I've had experience with this for 4 years.
Okay.
So I had 2 seniors that went through there. My oldest son graduated in 2017, and this was going on then. I made a lot of noise about it then. Also had other fish to fry, so to speak. So it kind of went off of my radar until, again, my second son that went to TCHS was a senior, and we received no information, not when to order a cap and gown, not when anything was happening. And it was even worse with COVID, because when the school was shut down, we didn't even get notified. Nothing. We don't get anything. The only emails we get are some from Dr. Lloyd that go out to everyone. That is it. So it had been discussed. Dr. Napaver, or Mr. Napaver, and I were discussing it heavily. At the end of the year, he was actually in communication with Mr. Fullerton to bridge the gap, so to speak, between OJR and TCHS, and not only for communication, but to showcase TCHS so those kids felt included and not like redheaded stepchildren, so to speak. They are part of O&J and they should be treated as such. So now, obviously, that I don't know. I mean, Mr. Napaver's not here anymore, so I don't know what's going to happen there. My youngest is now graduated, but I'm speaking on behalf of the full-time students and the part-time students that are going there. There's many reasons too why someone would go there full-time. It would be beneficial to them, which is why they go full-time, as it was for both of my sons, and they did very well and are doing very well. So, he wanted to bridge that gap along with Mr. Fullerton to show that these kids are worthy and they're at a minimum worthy of communication.
So Renee, it's our understanding that our TCHS families have been receiving the communication from the interim principal, Tom Henkel. We've received confirmation from them that they have received the communications, since the communications are now being sent by SkyAlert and not Skyward. So if you're hearing of somebody that's not occurring, then they need to let us know. But other parents have confirmed that they are receiving the principal's communication. Thank you.
And this is definitely something that is going to be on our radar, and we will continue to follow up and make sure that this is still going on. It sounds like it's a communications issue, and we definitely agree. Our TCHS students are just as valuable as all of our students, and no one is doubting that. So we will definitely keep this on our radar.
Prophet, one more hand raised, Miss Heather McCreary.
Okay.
Ms. McCreary, you are unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to thank you guys for finally talking about the TCHS issue, because that has been going on for years. And I actually don't understand the confusion now, because when we were talking about graduation and what to do as part of the PTA and Mr. Napaver, there were a lot of people on there, and the confusion was still going on at that time. So I'm not sure what would change between now and then. And I never could understand that, why an email just couldn't go out to them, because they are part of the community. So I thank you guys for finally looking at that, but the problem's been out there for a long time. The sleep study, I am very perplexed about, because it's been a solid, I think, 5 years. I know Melissa said 7, but it's definitely 5 now. And I think it would be a fine time to simply switch it back 15 minutes. I think that you guys have don't you guys have the data for who logged in when at the high school? Because you have that for the high school and the middle school. And I would doubt if many people logged in before 7:30. So if we have to do another survey or spend money, I think that you shouldn't even bother, frankly, because my kid and I did the survey in 2017, and it's been so far changed around since then that for those of us that took it as a serious concern, it now becomes, it's not serious anymore, because it's literally been 5 to 7 years since we've been trying to do it. And also, I think that when you guys are talking about the health plan, I think if the document that you guys put up would be put out to the public, that would be helpful. But also, I think you guys should be starting to talk about education, because we actually talk about that amongst ourselves on the community sites. And there's a lot of people that are concerned about people that are traveling, people aren't taking care of themselves. Since so many people in this district want some kind of in-person education, I think that looking to the district for information to be pushed out from pupil services, including, maybe you don't want to go on vacation to the beach right before school starts or before you go to your sports game, even if you're allowed to, those kind of things, because I think since it's so important for people to want to try to be back for some kind of in-person, that the district should owe that kind of step towards people, rather than people thinking they're going to have to tell on their neighbors and whatnot when they're away. And I think you guys should be a leader in that. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, so TCHS issue, we're working on sleep study. We're gonna circle back on. I think what's important with that survey was that it was taking another look at it in terms of, because people have never had a chance to adjust their schedule with school. And I think now that we had that time of quarantine, students had a chance to reevaluate their sleep health and how their schooling was done. So I think it gives it a little bit of a different perspective. So I think that that's valuable. And then in terms of communicating out, I know Dr. Lloyd's working on some communications from the district in terms of, information, and we will definitely be starting to push that stuff out soon.
Mrs. Prophet, that's the end of public comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.